Hello, and welcome back to the Software Testing Strategies book summary. And today we're talking about the case studies chapter. And the case studies is trying to apply the ideas in the book, tell you some stories. And we've got Perze Ababa, who we've known, Perze, who we've known forever. Part of the joke is I get his name wrong. But he's been on the Testing Show podcast before that. He was a frequent participant on Twist This Week in Software Testing. Before that, we knew him from conferences. The whole time he's been growing his professional career in the digital space. He's worked for NBC, worked for New York Times. He's was Johnson and Johnson, and they just spun off one of their divisions into Kenvue, right? And you're a test manager over there, and we're going to tell us a story about. So one of the things we talk about in the book is the triangle, where people at the bottom tend to talk about things, and people in the middle tend to talk about process, and people at the top talk about money. So you will frequently run into a problem where you say, "I want to, we should do the thing," and someone will say, "Well, our process doesn't allow for that." Or we have to follow the process. If you can short circuit it and get to the top and say, this is going to cost you this much money and I could do it, or I'm going to hit your deadline, which will enable you to generate revenue bits much faster if we do these things, all of a sudden the processes aren't as relevant. So it's the miscommunication between those three layers that gets us in a lot of trouble. It's one of the theories in the book. Percy has a story about it. So tell us, it's story time. I feel like I should get my little
Yeah,
Tell
so
us a
I
story, Percy. Go
I
for it.
I love how you brought up the triangle, and I'm hoping I could, do justice towards, getting story, hit those layers, within the triangle. So, uh, uh, a year or so ago, I was part of this project where we were replatforming a bunch of sites or infrastructure that is required to um, kind of interact with a certain set of customers. And uh, right before we released to production, we had an executive come in and say, I would like to see how the platform performs when all of our customers access the site at one time. So, mind you, the site can only be accessed through a special link that is sent through a newsletter. And the ask really boiled down to I need front page performance metrics for uh, how the platform will work if we have 1 million users on the site at the same time. Um, so we started asking, how can we do this? Right. So we came up with a tool that can do this. Then we started asking the deeper questions around how much load generators do we need so that we can hit that 1 million mark. Simple math will give you like around 16,000 or so based on the things that we know about uh, the project. The biggest question that we asked then really was like, what is the realistic number of users can we actually get, on a single campaign? And the answer was like around 1% of every time we send, an email campaign. So if you have 1 million, 1% of that, roughly 10,000 or so, right? Like rounded off. Um, so we go back to the executive and says, we can't do 1 million at once, but based on real numbers that we have, we can do 10,000 at once. We got to push back and saying, no, I want 1 million at once. No questions asked. So we measured the numbers to be able to do this. We went around and asked our infrastructure team on like, we need realistic numbers on how we can do this, how much it's going to cost us per bandwidth, per page, middle layer hits based on the number of points of presence where we're going to hit all of these customers from. And we came up with a grand old number between $5 to $7 million per test to be able to run this at once. These are also with a lot of technical assumptions, meaning that we can have all of our load generators spun up at a single point. hit all the URLs that we need to hit, or that's it, maybe even if it's just a single URL, that we can hit with the ideal setup that we want. Whether some of them have preload caching or non-cache or a hybrid of those things. Um, but nonetheless, we came up with a $5 to $7 million tab per execution. We brought this back to the executive, and that's when he accepted the reality that this is not a practical test, right? And that's really kind of the challenge to that, because if we're going to be very realistic about this, there's a ton of, I guess, infrastructure rules that we're going to have to break for us to be able to run a test that heavy. Mainly because, like, we have multiple firewalls, internal firewalls in place. We're going to have to let these requests pass through without triggering our DDoS um, protocols in place. And not just that, not just from the host, but from where we're putting this request, to come from, right? So, uh, like, personally for me, this really shows a lot of, like, when somebody asks for something, it's really, when you're looking at the dimensions of quality that you're looking at from a testing perspective, and when you provide a strategy on how to test a given ask, it really goes beyond. I mean, it goes beyond the functional know-how and capability of how you're going to do it, but what else is going to be impacted when you do it, right? So not really just that, but how heavy is this going to be on the wallets of uh, of the people that need to pay for uh, infrastructure support of your product, or even testability support of your product.
So
So
I've got a
that's my
thought
thought.
here. First off, I love the way that you broke that down. I think it's really would make sense. And oftentimes that's part of what we as testers bring to the conversation is what are some of the things that we have considered, or what are some of the things about the infrastructure that C class may not be thinking about. And one of the things that we discussed this before the start of this, but we were also saying, what are the odds? And it just seems like this would be something you'd need to bring up. What are the odds, A, that you're gonna get a message out to 1,000,000 people simultaneously to begin with? Odds are you're probably going to be limited to 5,000 transmissions at any given time. Otherwise, you're gonna be labeled as spam, right? I know from my own experience from generating a newsletter, that newsletter, because of that, we have it weighted so that we don't get flagged for that. And we only have, I think, maybe 5,000 users that we end up getting that message out to, and it takes us 2 to 3 hours to push everything out so that we don't get throttled or have our message blocked.
Right.
I'll send a message out and I'll get my own copy of the message in my own emails because I use that to monitor. Oh, look, that came to me 3 hours after I hit send, right? So the odds are you're not going to ever really have everybody looking at their email at that automatic same time and go, "Hey, let's go do this." Now, granted, I can appreciate that this is the case if you're selling Taylor Swift tickets and you have a set time that you need to do something. You've got a built-in demand for that. That's where being
Right.
able to
This
make
is a
sure you can
ticket
handle it.
master problem, right? Like,
Right.
if you work there,
Exactly.
there are contexts where this could be a very real problem. But if we are spacing out the emails so we don't get marked as spam, then it's spaced out over an extended period of time. We have a historical 1% conversion rate. And we were talking before the record button that if they actually did hit, what was the number? It was less than a quarter million. The denial of service system kicks in and says this is actually somebody trying to hack us. So the limit for that was significantly lower. None of that really mattered till they saw the dollar sign.
Right. Yeah.
Or it would have been very difficult to win that argument with the kind of logical modeling stuff which is throughout the book. There's actually a story that I think is Michael. I think the story is in there from when I was at Social Text, and we had a very similar conversation. And the problem was time delay. Like, yeah, we could do it, and it's going to delay your time to market by this much.
Right.
Or and it's going to mean we're not doing all these other testing things, so that'll delay that because then we got to go do those things. And the CEO of the company, acting vice president of engineering, said, "Skip it, skip it." And then there were performance problems in production. And that was like people came to the retrospective like, we're going to give it to QA. And he ran the retro. And when it came up, the CEO of the company said, that was a calculated decision. I was informed of the risks and I made the decision. What's next?
Right.
That was the end of that. If
No,
we
but
had
that's very big of that C-level executive to say,
absolutely. Oh
I'm
yeah,
gonna
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
gonna accept the responsibility for that.
I think yeah, I think that implicit in that was he was taking responsibility, although he did push on the like calculated risk kind of angle. But if we hadn't included him, if we hadn't pushed that triangle all the way up, conversation would have gone very differently and been pretty
Yeah,
Absolutely.
different.
I do think that the quality of the information that you provide that backs up, some estimations that will lead you to a a financing decision or a finance decision, so that that's what you're going to end up getting, so that we can support you for all of this effort that we just asked you to do. There has to be proper rigor, to that, because the butterfly effect of misinformation just becomes too great. As a person responsible for the delivery of testing for my organization, that's my biggest question. Always when someone comes in and says, "All right, so say we have 700 or so sites, we have 30,000 pages that we need to test, and it's going to take us 4 hours per site to test." Like, okay, but what about this and that? Right? What about the customizations that we know about? How are you going to handle that? Is that baked into the conversation? Are there also estimation features that you're kind of expecting to have already, uh, so that you can actually perform your work based on that estimation that you did, and not be able to provide that quality of data where you got those inferences from? It's really going to be problematic, from the get go. Because look, I will, if you say yes, then and I understand why you said what you said, then I will step in front of our senior leadership, and I'll take the hits if we don't deliver at the end of the day. But I have to understand to be able to support you, for these things. Yeah.
Go
Yeah, I
ahead,
think it
Michael.
often yeah, I think it often does come down to when we are put in the hot seat for these or when we have a test strategy. That's part of what we're trying to do is we're giving you the information, we're identifying risks, and ultimately at a certain point in time, we have to be as transparent as we can be, as honest as we can be. And again, very often I love referencing Matt and my mentor at Social Text, Ken Peer, one of the things that I always really admired about what Ken would do is Ken would just lay it on the line and he would say, "This is what will happen, or this is what could happen. This is the risk that is going to come to bear here." And he would look at the senior execs and he says, "Are you prepared to take on this level of risk and this level of uncertainty based off of what we have provided for you? I have given you all the information that we have. We have done all of the due diligence that we possibly can. Ball is in your court. How would you like to proceed?" And he didn't mince words. He basically said, "Look, we're not going to play this game of we're going to take a hit on this or we're going to, help you save face. No, we're giving you the information that you need to make a concerted decision. And if you make that decision, that's yours. And we will help you and we will support you in every way we can. But if you choose to either ignore or not do what we have suggested here, and it comes back to bite, you know where we stand." And I always found that to be a very valuable tool. He'd oftentimes say it in the sense of, "Look, this decision is beyond my pay grade. It's yours. But I will make sure that you are as informed as possible when you decide to make that decision."
Yeah, and I've got my continuous delivery book on the shelf, and I was struck in that book. It said we don't really have the time to dive into QA. People that are really interested in this stuff are going to be a little disappointed because we're trying to cover all this, and it has the circles and the overlap, and we're trying to, but we're trying to hit this high note of continuous delivery. And I think they did exceptionally well. And I like to think on a good day that when it comes to the thinking processes, how we're actually gonna do this, how we're gonna make this decision. That's the book that we wrote. How we're gonna figure out whether it's good enough, given that good and enough are completely subjective philosophical concepts. We're gonna have a chapter on philosophy and a chapter on politics. So that's what's coming up. I hope you'll stick with us. Thanks for being here today, guys, and let's do it again soon.
Right.
Fire book.
Oh, if you really want to know more, check out the table of contents. It's on Amazon and it's for free. Otherwise, maybe listen to tomorrow's. Thanks again.
All right.
Thank you.